NBC News investigative and consumer correspondent Vicky Nguyen, and joining me today is Jamie Nguyen. No relation, but together the two of us have been known as a win-win situation. Officially, Jamie is our coordinating producer for the consumer investigative team. I'm so excited that we're doing this NBCU Academy together.
Me too. It's been such a wonderful experience, and now we get to share it with everyone, the experience, the behind the scenes of what it took to put the racism virus on.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're going to talk about. We're going to take you into what created this idea, how we executed it, and what we're hoping to do moving forward as well. Jamie, obviously, for us, for the past year, we've been covering this, and I'd say that it was not only meaningful to us as journalists, but also it touched us as human beings. Can you share with the audience here how this idea started marinating for you?
The actual special itself. Yeah. You know, like you said, we've been covering it for a year. It's all of a sudden I found myself having conversations with my mother, my brother, my cousins in a very different way. You know, making sure that they were like aware of their surroundings in such a different way. And you and I talk about it, you know, your parents live in New York City, they're walking the streets of New York City, and you know, we're in our own little bubble, but all of a sudden you're hearing about these cases where people are being attacked or targeted because they're Asian American. And it's something that I just couldn't ignore anymore. I couldn't just say like it was a one-off. More and more across the country from coast to coast. It was something that we needed to really sort of dig into and deeper.
Stop AAPI Hate recorded more than 2,800 anti-Asian incidents in a 10-month period.
And we were literally looking at thousands of incidents from stopaapihate.org. And I think that as those incidents kept piling up, it wasn't enough to just do one news report here or there for the Today Show or for Nightly News.
After a recent string of attacks against Asian Americans.
And then I know for you, it was also an accumulation of all the things you'd been thinking about over the past year, but also a chance encounter at 30 Rock. Talk about that.
So it's been marinating in my mind, and I think what really kind of crystallized it was in February when we started seeing the videos of elderly Asian Americans being attacked. And you know, we are a visual medium, and whenever anything is caught on video, it takes on a different sort of level of interest. And so once those videos started happening in California, that's when it kind of like triggered something in my brain, and I'd been thinking about, now we have the visuals to kind of back it up. What can we do? And I actually came into 30 Rock for a different project that I was working on. And I ran into our colleague. She has a corner office on the 4th floor next to us, Allie. And Allie said, hey, what are you working on? And I didn't plan it, but I sort of just opened up my mouth and I said, Allie, what do you think about this idea? I really think that we need to just do much more on this growing anti-Asian sentiment. We really need to just, not just do a piece on a show, but really sort of spend time on it, do some sort of town hall.
Go deeper.
Go deeper. And she said, I think it's a great idea. Send an email. And I was like, really? Just send an email, she said. And sure enough, I just sent an email to Janelle Rodriguez, who oversees News Now, and within hours, I got an email saying, let's do it. And before you know it, 24 hours later, we got a title, we got an air date, and boom, we're off to the races, and a team to put it together.
Yeah, and without the relationships we built from the past couple of years, just getting to know people in the building who work in different departments, I think that is really valuable advice for young people starting out in any business, in any corporation, that you never know when you're going to cross paths again with someone who might be a catalyst for something that you're really passionate about, or that could help you move your career forward, or just do something that's meaningful to you. Okay, so that's the behind the scenes of how this all came together, which I think is a fascinating story in and of itself, and it speaks to the support we have at this company. Let's pivot to the nitty gritty. We had 4 segments. We went from 30, 40 to 60 full minutes. How did you and Marissa Buchanan, our executive producers, right? How did you break it down and decide, okay, these are the groupings, these are the segments we think are important?
So you laugh at me all the time, but sometimes when I'm in the shower or just like sort of laying in bed, things just come to me.
Yeah.
And like I literally just had like these 3 points like come to me like in the shower, and it was just like, you know, the problem, the impact, and how we move forward. Because you can't have, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour, you just can't be Debbie Downer the entire time. You need to give people something actionable, something that they can do. I knew that we had to end the show on an uplift, right? So we kind of had 3 sections, and we zoned in on the impact. It turned out to be 2, not just like the mental toll, but the financial toll. Mm-hmm. So that's how we ended up with 4, and that's how we ended up with an hour.
Yeah.
But you know, you kind of, like to your point, you have to reel people in though with what is happening right now, right? So we laid out the situation, gave it a little history and some context, and then that's when the conversation sort of took place.
Yeah, and then let's talk about some of the guests that we got, because this I thought was really smart producing. We didn't have each guest kind of reinvent the same wheel over and over. We knew our guests were really diverse, they were smart, they could speak to many different aspects of what was happening in the Asian American community, and so that's how we focused them. We didn't have Margaret Cho saying the same thing Brian T was saying, the same thing that Yul Kwan or Olivia Munn were saying, or Jeremy Lin for that matter.
Right. So I'm going to peel back the layers like a little bit, because I think what we're talking about is a very important issue, and for all intents and purposes, like, it's not exactly the most like teasable aspect, right? Because television is about what's tease-worthy, what's going to get people in the door.
The Racism Virus with Vicky Nguyen will be streaming on NBC News Now tonight at 8 p.m.
And so sometimes while the community leaders and the politicians are the ones sort of doing some of the work, that in itself isn't enough to get people to the door, to the inside the tent, so to speak. So we kind of had our wish list of celebrities who we knew were really outspoken and passionate about this issue. It's not like we went to someone who didn't know anything about it and decided to talk about it. We kind of did our homework and looked to see, like, how outspoken has Olivia Munn been? How outspoken has like Margaret Cho been, or Sandra Oh, or Daniel Day Kim? Like, we wanted people who were already invested and passionate about it. So we had like our guest list or wish list of people.
Yes.
And then, for different reasons, scheduling conflicts, some people couldn't do it. But at the end of the day, we ended up with a really great mix of movers and shakers, from the business world and
Totally, yeah. We had Benny Lowe from
Next
Shark, and then we also had Eric Toda, who's a high-up marketing executive at Facebook. So we covered business. I think we definitely had star power, which was important, and recognizable names, I think, outside the Asian American community. But we had grassroots folks, too, Jessica O. Young from Compassion in Oakland. So for me, it felt like a really balanced mix. And when you talk about wearing all those different hats, it's true. I was reaching out to contacts. You were reaching out to contacts. You didn't wait for people in the booking department only to do things. You went in and said, what needs to be done, I'm going to make it happen. And I think that showed in this special because everybody did everything that they could to make it successful. Can you speak a little bit about this idea that at the last minute, remember Olivia Munn, we were gonna have her live in the first panel. And she woke up and had, she was sick. Like she had these crazy allergies and this whole thing. So we had to tape her at the last second, which left us with 2 of the 3 guests. Russell Jung, who was fantastic from Stop AAPI Hate. Kim Yam, who is part of our Asian America digital vertical. And she writes a lot of these great articles on the NBC digital side. But to literally, I'm sitting in the chair when we figure out, okay, we're definitely not going to have Olivia Munn. What are we going to do? How do we pivot? As a producer, that's your job. That's your world.
So let me give you guys a lay of the land, okay? It's 9 a.m. We're taping at 10 a.m. And this is a live to tape show.
Yes, explain that.
Which means we want it to happen like it was happening live, right? So that whatever happens now, that's how it's gonna air at 8 p.m. that night with as little editing as possible. So we're going over the show together and I get the message, Olivia Munn can't make it. And we're like, what?
And then you give me the message, Olivia Munn can't make it, and I'm like, she's in our first block. What are we gonna do?
So then we had people check like, wow, Margaret Cho, we were saving for the end of the show. So what ended up happening was we were in a call to see if we could push up her time so that we could be first. Meanwhile, that's happening. We're trying to figure out what our game plan is. So we have what we build called a rundown, and it's basically like a roadmap for the show, like the order of it, the questions, who's asking what, etc. So when we knew we were losing Olivia, I decided to throw in the prompter a generic toss, which means an intro for Olivia. So in case we were able to get her later, we could do it so that Vicky was still on set in the same clothes, right? So
yep.
We came up with something like, earlier I had a chance to speak to Olivia Munn, who has from an actress to an activist who talked about her new role. So
as a producer, you're plan A, then you're plan B, C, D, and so that's what you were doing. You were covering all of our bases.
And so while we're figuring that out, we made it work in the sense that it sort of turned out to be a blessing in disguise because as the day wore on, there was a controversy brewing over the hiring of the new editor-in-chief for Teen Vogue.
Right.
Because of some tweets that she made 10 years ago. Even though she apologized for those tweets, some people thought her tweets were racist because some of them made fun of Asian eyes.
Let me read one of the tweets that people are really reacting to. She wrote, Googling how to not wake up with swollen Asian eyes.
Those comments are hard to read because, you know, I remember growing up and having people tease me for my mom's Asian eyes, for my Asian eyes, and it's a triggering thing to read.
And so as a result of that news developing, we were able to kind of parlay what was going to be a natural conversation about sort of the topic of the moment, which was anti-Asian sentiment.
It's nice to be able to talk about all the things that went into it because the topic matter was so heavy, it was so serious. And can you speak to the uplift at the end and the action item and why it's so important? We do this in our consumer stories, obviously. We always try to give people takeaways so that they leave feeling empowered. Talk about that. Why is that so important?
I just think at the end of the day, when you just lay out problem after problem, you know, just think about it. You're like, oh, enough already, you know? It's like coronavirus. Now we have to deal with like hate crimes. It's just, you're just adding. So sometimes when you feel that way, when life just feels out of control, there's small things that you can do to kind of feel like you have some control. So that could be as simple as like writing up a sign, you know, of like, you know, I support you, or I hear you, and reaching out to a colleague or reaching out to a friend. And I think you need those tangible moments because at the end of the day, Asian American or not, we're all Americans and we all want to feel connected, right? We all know what it's like to be the new person and not have any friends, or to be the kid that gets made fun of for whatever reason, for your hair, for your shoes, for your clothes. We all know what it's like to be an outsider. So here we are, Asian American or not, you know those feelings. Those are what our guests were, you know, portraying or relaying to everybody. Like, this is what it felt like. And whether you were Jewish, you know, African American, Hispanic, we all know what that feels like to not be part of the group. And I think that's what the goal of the special was, is to show that we are connected and we're better, stronger together.
Yeah, that's kind of all we can hope for, is that these stories make an impact. Before we part, do you have any words of wisdom for our audience, most of whom want to be journalists, want to be doing what you're doing, what I'm doing?
So we are very, very lucky to be surrounded by supporters, and that's what you should find in yourself. Supporters who share your dreams, who know your dreams, and can help you move along. Look, it's not always going to be perfect. I know not every project is going to get
we get no's. We get plenty of no's and red lights too.
Yeah.
But how do you build that capital? Because I think that's what it comes from. It comes from people support you because they want to, because they see that you can do things and that you've been a good colleague, a good ally. So how do you build that capital with people so that when it's time to cash in those chips, they're there?
I think you just have to do good work. At the end of the day, all we have is our name, right? Like, I'm Jamie Nguyen, I'm Vicky Nguyen, or she's Vicky Nguyen. Like, there's nothing you can do. No, you know, no one can change our names and our reputation. So you do everything you can to preserve it. I'm never going to pretend to know that I have all the answers. You know, when I don't, I'm the first to say, I'm not sure. Let's find out. Let's dig in. And that's key. It's like, I don't ever want to guess an answer and be wrong. So to me, I'd rather be safe rather than sorry and have the right answers.
I learned a lot from this conversation, so I'm sure that folks watching did too, and thank you for your time and answering my questions. And that wraps us up for today. Huge thanks to Jamie Nguyen and obviously everyone who supported the Racism Virus special, which clearly it was a whole lot of folks in this building. Let me also remind you that you can still watch the Racism Virus. It is on our YouTube channel, and we'll have a link in the video description that you can just click on as well. Thank you so much. I'm Vicky Nguyen. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us for this edition of NBCU Academy.